Well,
Thank you for having me.
congratulations on your ASC Award nomination for this limited series.
Thank you. It's quite a shock, I have to say.
Yeah. Everyone always
Oh,
says that, and it's always like it's a shock only to the person who's nominated because like the work is also beautiful. It's like, well, obviously, yeah. But I again, congratulations. I would love to start with talking about your process of getting involved. You shot all 7 episodes. What was that collaboration like with production?
well, it was definitely the longest shoot I've ever done. It ended up being 110 days. There was 100 days of principal photography and then 10 days of pickups after we sort of wrapped. So I wasn't quite sure what that would feel like at the beginning, but I got involved through Glendon Ivan, a director who I'd worked with on a few other projects before. And he sort of like sent me the scripts about a year and a half before we started shooting. And the scripts were quite rudimentary when I first read them, but the general tone of the story was there, and we sort of started to talk about locations and where we could shoot because the locations were such a big part of the process. The story's set around some really specific areas and some really specific architectural sort of elements. So we actually started getting involved with the locations quite early on. Like the burning of cane was a really big part of the story, and that's actually a dying art form in Australia. So burning cane is it's almost illegal now.
Mm.
So there's only a few areas in Australia that do that. So there was all that kind of stuff sort of bubbling around.
I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of time to go back and forth and collaborate in pre-production to figure out the visual tone of everything, having
Yeah.
gotten the script so early. I mean, what were there any references, inspirations you were looking at, or how did that conversation go?
Well, because Glendon and I had worked together quite a lot, we have quite a good sense visually of each other and where we're sitting, and tonally we're quite in tune. So strange, like at the start of a project, I usually start doing I do a sort of like visual manifesto. So you start sort of creating rules for yourself, and they obviously change, but you sort of like you have this sort of like organism that you start feeding material into, and you see how it starts to take shape. And Glendon and I usually have a sort of visual document that we start building, and we sort of both feed images into it, and we sort of sit together through the whole process and we talk. And I like to listen to a lot of the conversations that he's having if I can, with all the departments. And we sort of get all the departments together quite early on. And like I would be starting to talk to the designer and the costume and the hair and makeup at like a fairly early stage, as soon as I can, basically. And even the editors, like as early as we can all start chatting and trying to work out the tone of it, we sort of do. Um, but yeah, visually and tonally, we sort of just had the production office, and we started to just build the world around us, and you sort of start to get a good sense of it. And the stuff that works and the stuff that didn't work was starting to stand out quite obviously when you sort of wrap yourself in the tone of the show. So by the time we shot, we had a fairly good sort of grip on how the show was going to feel. And then obviously the actors start arriving, and they've got their own sort of like take on the story and the tone of the story. So yeah, it was an interesting project for that matter. And also trying to wrap your arms around 7 hours is a really big deal. I certainly hadn't done that before, so it was trying to work out how to actually do pre-production for a 7 hour exercise. Story wise, it's a lot to keep in your head, and just trying to prepare for that. So we ended up having to prepare sort of as we shot. So
Mm.
every spare moment we had, I was sort of prepping the next leg. And the shoot was broken up uh, over Christmas, so we had 3 or 4 weeks off during Christmas. So that was almost spent doing pre for the next leg. So it was pretty massive. I was tired. I was very, very tired afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that sounds very intense, not having another DP that you're switching off with. So
Mm.
whatever's coming next, you're having to prep as you go. And, I guess I would want to ask, did you learn anything surprising from this experience of suddenly going on to an over 100-day shoot? You'd never been on a shoot this long before. What did you take away from that?
I think it was having rules and having a sense of tone, so that when you're tired or when you're sort of in that period in the shoot that everything's getting, everyone's exhausted, the crew's exhausted, the producers exhausted, the director's exhausted, the writer's exhausted, the editors, like there comes a period during a long project where you can feel the sort of like there's a pressure building. And I think when you're in those moments, I think having a really strong fabric that you're taking through the project, or something you can sort of lean back on, whether it's an image or whether it's whether it's like, I mean, I never look at the tonal document that we create after we start shooting. I never go back to it because I don't really need it, and sometimes it can actually be distracting. But I think it's like trying to stay true to a feeling that you have about the show, so that when you're exhausted, you can sort of have a touchstone. And even if the scene feels really complicated, you know that if you can get a sentiment that you have inside your preparation, well, that doesn't make sense, but it's like it's hard to explain, but you lean on a touchstone that you have, and whether the scene is complicated or not, you sort of know you're heading in the right direction, and you're not going to make any strange decisions due to exhaustion.
Right.
I hope that makes sense. Sorry.
No, it does make sense. It does make sense. So you just keep in alignment in the direction that you're trying to go.
Mhm.
But yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah,
So in this nominated episode, what are some scenes that stand out to you that you really loved filming?
that's a good question. I actually think, honestly, I think the cane burning was a really like amazing process for us, because Glendon and I we couldn't quite get it into the schedule. It was written into the script, but we were having trouble because the cane burn happened about 8 hours away from where our the shoot was happening.
Yeah.
So we actually waited until a weekend, and we drove up on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, I can't remember, but it was a weekend when we were off shooting. And Glendon and I quite literally traveled up with a crew of about 3 people, and we met some local farmers in that area, and we took our lead actor with us up there. And we quite literally got out of the car, and the farmer was like, because it's so weather dependent, he was basically like, we've got to go, it wasn't like you get there and you say, hey, we're going to set up some shots, and he was like, the cane is burning now. And we were quite literally got out of the car, and I just grabbed the camera, chucked it on the shoulder, and we just walked around, and we shot the whole sequence, probably shot over about 2 hours of in a sort of falling light. And it was really fortuitous that it actually happened through a really beautiful time of the day. So it sort of
Mhm.
happened from sunset into dusk, which was sort of when we were trying to shoot a lot of our exteriors for the show. Because in Australia in summer, the sun here is incredibly harsh. So scheduling is such a big part of the way that we shoot, especially when you have an elemental sort of story that takes place in a lot of exteriors, which ours was. And you've got a lead actor there who sort of, we thought we'd have time to sort of, prepare. And all of a sudden, Charlie, our lead actor, he's out of the car and he jumps into
Like, here
costume.
we go.
He's walking around trying to work out how to burn a cane field, because he was actually lighting the cane on fire too,
Uh-huh.
under the careful guidance of a farmer. But
Right.
it was quite funny. Once we all finished, there was like a decompression, and we were like, what just happened?
Finally have time to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole opening sequence in the cane field was just incredible. We shot in this sort of really remote location in Grafton, New South Wales, and that house, just after we started shooting, the whole house went under flooding. So the right
Oh,
up to the,
wow.
because we had really big floods in Australia just up. So we got so lucky to actually get the sequences there. But we spent a few weeks in this house that was just so textured, and it was an abandoned house that the production, Melinda Doring, like built from fairly bare bones, and did such a great job. But yes, I think all the sequences around the cane field with our really young actor were pretty incredible. She was like quite mature for her age. And we basically would schedule some scenes, but then we'd try to allow some breathing room in the schedule so that we could sort of, try and find some more organic sort of scenes within the show. Because when you go to a good location, it presents so many opportunities that you haven't planned for. There's sort of those opportunities you can't really write, but when you get to the location, you realize there's like so much opportunity, and if you haven't scheduled them, it's quite heartbreaking because you see the potential in something, but you don't have the time.
Right.
But so I think, yeah, that location and that sort of part of the shoot was quite special. Children are so incredible. Like you would, when we'd stop shooting, the little girl in the story would just start doing stuff that felt so cinematic, like because she, like when you put her in that environment, she had this like amazing long hair and she was wearing these really incredible costumes, and anything that she was doing felt like quite gripping to me. Like when I would watch her, I'd be like, oh my God, there's so much weight in what she's doing. And whether it's because I was taking some residual sort of like residual matter from the story and putting it and projecting it, I'm not sure, but it felt really like poetic, like being at that house. And yeah, it was quite a fun period.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, you went through this whole process, filmed over 100 days, shot all 7 episodes, and now the show's been, getting some very high praise, especially for its cinematography. What is it like to be nominated for an ASC award for your work on this?
Like I still, honestly, I know you said everyone says it, but I still can't quite believe it. I wasn't expecting it. I mean, I was quite shocked when it got into Camera Homage last year, sorry. And that was like quite a, incredible experience for me. I'd actually broken my leg, so I couldn't go.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, it was very heartbreaking. But to receive this nomination, I mean, I've been reading American Cinematographer since I was like a teenager, and I've been a long admirer of the ASC. So like to be, I mean, it's insane that me even saying this. I can't believe I'm doing this Zoom, to be honest. It's quite literally unbelievable to me. I don't know how I feel about it. I can't even wrap my head around it, to be honest. It's a huge honor, massive honor. I'm quite nervous to come to LA and go to the ceremony, if I'm being perfectly honest.
You just need to not break your leg again. That's the only goal.